Good morning, everyone out there in YouTube land. My name is Jared, and this is my channel, Mazda B3K. In this episode, we're going to do a drain and fill on the rear differential of my 2001 Ford F250 named Miss Mildew. Without further ado, let's get started. Alrighty, so I have done rear differentials on trucks before. I have a 93 video that you can take a look at. This one's going to be ever so slightly different though, because that's your rear differential, if folks didn't know. That big old, they call it the pumpkin, located here in the back, and it does have fluid in it, and we do need to swap that out. This one's a little bit different because it is a limited slip rear differential, so there is an additive that must be put in addition to the gear oil in order to make all this work. And I have that additive here. So this is Yukon limited slip friction modifier. It will make sure that I don't have an angry, noisy rear differential. So the amount, best I can tell, is you need to put in about 4 ounces. And it's not listed on this bottle, but this bottle, it weighs 4.3 ounces. So my assumption, you know what assumptions can do to you, is that this is a 4-ounce bottle. So as you can see in my hand, it's not that big. So I'm pretty sure this is 4 ounces of additive, which is what I need. So we'll go ahead and we will just get started on removing and replacing. Alright, so before we get started, in addition to the limited slip additive, we also are going to need about 4 quarts of 75W140 synthetic gear oil. That is what is called out for in the owner's manual by Ford. So this is Master Pro, that's O'Reilly house brand, but it is full syn, it meets the oil spec, it's 75W140. So this should let me do that. You're also going to need to reseal the diff cover. And for that, I like using gaskets because I really don't like scraping RTV. I mean, it works, but it's just a mess. So this is a Felpro RDS 55394. So we got a gasket. We have our gear oil. We have our additive. So that should be everything we need as far as to fill. You're also going to need some kind of a pump. And if you're going to do this a lot, you need to buy yourself one of the nicer electric pumps. I just bought this poopy manual transfer pump. They do work, but man, they are fiddly and annoying. But they work. So this is what we're going to work with so that we can actually pump new oil into the differential after we put the cover on. Alright, now we got to get down there, figure out the bolt size and start opening things up and all that good stuff. One thing you might be wondering about is, how do I tell if I have a limited slip differential? And if you don't have the original sale card that you always see at the dealership that's in the window that it's going to point that out, what you can do is come to your manufacturer's sticker, which is at the bottom of what would be the B pillar on this car. And if you take a look, there's going to be an axle code, and the axle code says C1. So then what you can do is look that up online and say Ford axle code Charlie 1, and that is going to line up with a particular type of axle, meaning limited slip, standard, or also the gear ratio. For example, if I look up C1, if I remember correctly, that's a 373 gear ratio with a limited slip differential. So this code will be different depending on what your differential is on your truck. But this is where you can look. If for some reason you don't have this sticker, Another place you can look, though this one kind of disappears more than the sticker does, is you may have noticed there are these metal tags that were attached to the differential, and these are axle code tags. So if you can still read it, like this one's rough. I would have to work on it a bit. But there's this one. This one actually had two. I'm not sure why there were two. But you can clean this up, read what's stamped. Again, feed that through Google, and it will tell you what kind of differential and axle you have. So I took a minute to clean these two tags up, see what they said. And this is also a verification of this is a limited slip. It's a little hard to read. It says 3L73, so that means this is a 373 gear ratio, and the L means that it's a limited slip. So the rest of this tells you some other stuff, like 10.5 should be the size of the differential, 10.5 inches. The 1C06, I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure what this up here means. I don't have Ford's axle code stuff fully memorized. And the other tag's kind of neat because I've never seen it before, but it says 75 140 synth oil only. So it actually, they put a tag on it to specifically tell you what oil you needed to use so you didn't blow up your rear diff. That's kind of neat. So I'm going to put those back on, and now you know what an axle tag looks like and what you should expect if you've got one on your diff. So neat. Alright guys, that is your fill port. So we're looking at the front of the differential case. I'll zoom out so you can kind of get some perspective more. So there you go. The way you get it out is that should be a 3/8. So you can take a 3/8 extension on a 3/8 ratchet and jam it in there and start working on getting it out. But do be careful. It will round out on you, and it may have been sealed with red thread locker. So you may wind up having to get some heat on it to break that thread locker loose, so then you can finally get this out. And I didn't do it this time because I wasn't thinking about it, but you should always try to break this loose first before you drain your fluid, because if you cannot open this and you drain your fluid, you can't go anywhere because you can't fill it. So I'm going to work on getting this out, and then I will give you an idea of what you're looking at here. Now, as you can see, this is sloppy. I don't like it. When you go to do this, you want to get this inserted as far as you can and square, so that when you begin to do rotating force, it won't round out on you. But I wanted you guys to see what I was talking about in case you're not real familiar with ratchet sizings and things like that. Okay, so I wound up having to take my propane torch and throw some heat on it. And then I still had to use my breaker bar. But I broke it loose. I got it out in one piece without rounding it or stripping it. So that's what you'll see once you get it out. And then here is our doodle bopper. There is a magnet in the end of it to catch material as the gears wear. So the magnet didn't look bad. I've already cleaned it out, but it didn't look bad. And from what I see here, somebody has been in here before. So this has been serviced at least once, which is good, but I can also see the rounding marks, so I have to be careful with it moving into the future so we don't have problems. Alrighty, so here we are, and this truck stands tall enough. I don't need to jack anything up to do what I got to do, and thankfully the exhaust is not going to get in my way. These are 13mm bolts, and what I'm going to do is break them loose by hand, and then I have this really handy auto driver to take them out the rest of the way. They're probably, some of them are going to be gooed up with RTV, so they're going to fight you a bit. And also you'll notice I have an oil pan in place. That's because once you take enough bolts out, the rear diff's going to start to leak. And unless you want to mess, you need to have a pan in place. So also understand, once you start taking this off and you've taken it off enough, you kind of have to finish the job. So don't start this unless you think you got the time to finish it. And with that, we will start cracking bolts, and I'll bring you back when we're getting ready to take the whole cover off. Make sure that when you take these off, leave the top two or so that way you can kind of control the oil coming out as the seal loosens up, because otherwise you get a god-awful mess. Alrighty, so I've gotten all but one out. And there's probably an SAE size, maybe, what is 13? Might be a 9/16 that would work on this as well. I found 13 was a little bit sloppy. You're going to have to clean some of these bolt heads so things will grip correctly. And also I found that on mine, some of these were really loose and then some were tight. Some had some lock washers on them. Not sure what's going on there. But anyway, whoever last touched this gooed it really, really good, and I can't get a pry bar in there. So I'm going to take my mallet and kind of tap. See if I can't break this loose a little bit. And I'm going to sit here with screwdrivers and pry bars until... The idea is I'm going to try to break this loose so this will hinge out, and then just dump all the gear oil into the pan, into it in a controlled fashion so I don't make a mess. So I'm going to work on that, and I will bring you back once that is accomplished. Alright, took a screwdriver, got it in there. Finally was able to pop it out a little bit, and here we go. A nice controlled drain. I spilled a little bit. Have to clean that up, but we're going to let this do this until it's mostly empty, and then I'm going to finish breaking the case loose, and then we'll take it off, because then we get to clean all that RTV off. Fun, fun, fun. Alright, so here is what your differential looks like. Now, when you're looking at all these gears, the spider gears and everything, the main thing that you're looking for is for any chips, broken bits, or when you look down here in the bottom of the case, if you see a bunch of glittery silver, those are all indications that something has worn quite a bit, and you need to figure out what that is and probably get it addressed. Now, what I am seeing offhand kind of lines up with what I'd expect to see. You can see there those teeth are worn. Not heavily worn, but they are worn, but they're not chipped. Pieces are not missing, and that's kind of what I would expect to see for a differential that has 270,000 miles on it. Now, could it have looked a bit better maybe with fluid changes? I think so. The guy I got this from, he wasn't horrible on maintenance, but nor was he great. And something that people often forget to do maintenance on is the rear differential. So, not great, not bad. I think this will be serviceable to me for quite a long time. So, pretty much the last little drips are about done. The next step involves a lot of paper towels. You're going to want to take your paper towels and clean up as much of the gunk that is now laying at the bottom of the case, and wipe that just as clean as you can before we button this back up and try to do the fill part of this operation. Alright, here is our cover. And all of that lovely RTV has to be scraped off until we get a clean surface. We also want to clean out this interior until it shines. You can use paper towels, you can use brake cleaner, but get this nice and clean before we do reinstallation. So I'm going to work on that, and then I'll go work on the differential because I feel like being up on my feet at the moment versus rolling around on my back. So a note on gasket scraping. It looks like this aluminum, best I can tell, they put like a black anodizing coating on it. Maybe not, but I'm using just a standard razor blade to scrape. I've got some carbide super scrapers, but I'm pretty sure this is aluminum and they will absolutely gouge aluminum very, very easily. So you're gonna have to work your way around and scrape off every little bit of RTV so that if you're gonna RTV again, that it'll work correctly, or if you're gonna use a gasket like me, that the gasket will actually seal correctly. So there's no quick and dirty way to do this. You just have to take your time, scrape it off, hit it with a brake clean as you go, kind of see where you are. And when you can run your finger over it and you don't feel any RTV anymore, you just feel good metal, you are ready. This is ready to be put back on. You can set it aside and then switch your focus to the differential itself. Alright, I'm declaring this done. You can still see gasket material, but in most cases you cannot really feel it. I can feel it some there, but essentially there are low spots on this metal, and so when I'm going after these low spots, what's happening is I am gouging other areas. And they're not bad right now, they're not critical, but if I keep doing this, I'm going to cause damage that a gasket can't take care of. And then the only thing I will be able to do is RTV it, which I don't want to do. So I've hit this with air, I've hit it with brake cleaner. What I find interesting is there's actually some nicks and cuts on the inside of this case. I don't know what from, but I thought that was kind of interesting. This is pretty much clean and good to go. I'm going to put it inside the truck so that it can't get dirty. You may be wondering about this gasket material here. Since that's not on the sealing surface, I'm not really worried about it. You know, I can pick it off, but what I was finding with my scraper is when I was going at the angles to get at this, I was scraping through the anodize and actually scraping the aluminum proper. So I kind of stopped doing that when I thought about it and said, hey, that's not on my sealing surface. So yeah, I kind of butchered this a bit. Again, this isn't to the point where it's not recoverable, but I have done better jobs. This is not my best. I wish Ford had left this all silver so I had a better judge of when I was actually through the material or not. Anyway, I'm going to set this aside and then we're going to go below and we're going to take the paper towels with us and we're going to clean out all the goop that's in the bottom of the differential case. Alrighty, many paper towels later and about a half a can of brake cleaner later, I've got the inside of the diff case as cleaned out as I want it to be. I have dried up all my excess brake cleaner, and what I'm doing now is I have put paper towel covers around all the key stuff because, again, this is why I don't like RTV. We got to scrape this side to make sure that we'll have a good seal. It looks like this side came up really clean and there shouldn't be much scraping to do, but we don't want that falling in, so cover this up so then you can just pull the paper towels off and take the stuff that you scrape off with it to keep this as clean as possible. Alright, so remember we had covered this to keep junk out, so just kind of yoink this out. All right, and next we got to open up our gasket, which it's been real fun keeping this thing flat the last couple weeks. But take that out, and then you're going to line it up, grab a bolt, run a couple of bolts through to hang this in position, and then go ahead and get them all finger tight, and then we'll do a torque sequence from there. Well, not torque, but we'll make sure it seats evenly and firmly. Alright, please ignore the saw in the background. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to get these cleaned up because they got a lot of RTV and junk in them. And some of them, like this guy, has a bunch of split washers on him, and I don't know why. It's kind of weird. So we're going to get these standardized, make sure the lengths are good, and make sure the threads are good. And then we can finally get the gasket out and start putting this thing back together. I'm going to use this metal brush to get the threads cleaned up. Okay, so if you've been following along, you've got all your bolts in, they're finger tight, and now we got to do our final snugging. To make sure this sits evenly, basically you want to go inside out. So whether your inside starts over there, or it starts up there, it starts down there, you want to work the inside bolts and then work your way around. So say you started here where this axle tag is, you'd go from there, then you go over and up one, right? And then you come over and do this one. And then you go down and over one. And at that point, you've gotten those four done. So then you move over, right? So you'd come down over here and do that one. And then you'd come across and do the upper one over here. And you're going to kind of keep doing it in a circle like that. And what this does is it makes sure that all the bolts are sitting evenly and that everything's going to have roughly the same amount of torque. It's called a torque sequence. Now, I did not look up the actual torque values for this. Just make it, snug, but don't kill it. I figured out why there were two lock washers on this bolt. It was because there was junk in the threads, and whoever was here last, instead of cleaning out the threads, they just said, you know what, I'm going to put some spacers in there and make it tight, and we're going to call it a day. And so that's what they did. I took some PB Blaster and I worked it in and out a couple of times, got better every time, and now I've got the bolt fully seated on its own. So that's fixed. So anyway, I'm going to do that final torque I was just talking about, the torque sequence, and then we're going to be ready to fill. Yay! Alright, so at this point you're going to take your fluid transfer pump. One end is going to go into your jug of synthetic gear oil. The other end is going to go into here. And the beauty of this, yummy, more junk. But the beauty of this is you can't overfill it. So you'll sit here and you'll pump and pump and pump until your arm's about to fall off. And you keep going until you get a steady stream of gear oil coming down the front of the diff. And when you see that, it means that you're at the level of the fill port and it's full and you're good to go. Now, you may ask, well, what about the additive, that limited slip additive that I need to put in? What I've decided to do is I'm going to pump about a quart or so of fluid into the diff, and then I'm going to take the little bottle of additive, I'm going to pour it into my I'm going to pour it into my jug of gear oil, mix it up in there, and just pump away, because you're going to pump most of the entire jug into the diff. So, alright, so I changed my mind and I just ran the transfer pump directly into my little additive bottle. Sorry about that. and I just drained it dry, so that way I made sure that all the additive is going to wind up going inside the diff, because you need about 4 ounces, and that's what's in that bottle. Now I'll start adding in the regular gear oil. Alrighty, so I actually overfilled it a tad. I was waiting until I had a stream, but what I didn't realize is the tube from my transfer pump was actually holding a bunch of fluid in, so as soon as I pulled it out, it went, and so it's slightly overfull probably, but not a big deal. If you look on the bottle here, if you can see, I about drained it dry. It's at around half a quart, a little bit less. So it should have been like right at 3.5. So I definitely overfilled it a little bit, but as you can see, a lot of that came back out because I was trying to let it come back down a little bit. So I don't think we got a problem. We've got our additive in. We've got a full load of fresh fluid. Got the plug back in. It's nice and tight. So at this point, we are done. The very last thing that you've got to do after you clean up is just drive and listen for whining, clattering, chirping, any kind of weird noises coming out from the rear differential as you drive, particularly when you do sharp turns. If you don't have enough fluid in there, you'll hear it then. But if you filled this until it began to puke, like I said to, you should be fine. That's one of the cool things about filling a rear diff, is you don't have to use a dipstick and kind of guesstimate it. It lets you know when it's full. So, and the one other thing you need to check after you drive around a bit is take a look at your diff cover seal, whether you chose to use RTV or gasket maker, or chose to use a gasket like me. Check it, make sure you don't have any leaks coming from there. If you do, go ahead and address them. With all that said, I consider this a complete repair. Okay, as you can see, I have been at this, but I am victorious. So this is a good repair for changing out the diff fluid, rear diff fluid, with limited slip additive on my 2001 Ford F250 named Miss Mildew. So please leave a comment. I like to read them. I like to reply to them. I like to learn from them. Please also like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, do all that fun YouTube stuff. And remember, I make the mistakes so you don't have to. I'll see you guys next episode.